Good morning and welcome to this webinar on how to drop the rope and get more out of your relationships with your employees. I'm Julie Allen of Julie Allen Consulting. You are very welcome to this event, and for those of you that may be recording and have attended these many times, you are welcome back. So I'm just going to start my screen sharing now, and I will talk you through how to get more out of your relationships, both your employee relationships, but also those other relationships that you have in life. So why are we here having this conversation? Why have I maybe selected this topic today? Well, first of all, the Gallup State of the Global Workplace 2022 report highlighted some statistics which don't really look too good. And that is, if we look at the green line here at the bottom of this graph, we can see the levels of employee engagement from 2009, moving up to 2022. So you can see a gradual increase from 12% right up to what is now 21% in 2021. So if we look at this is saying that we have globally 21% of the workforce that are actively engaged. And if we consider that and what that means, if we look at those people who aren't engaged in the workplace, engagement has an impact on productivity, it has an impact on profit, it has an impact on GDP. So the emphasis is always to be pushing up the levels of global engagement. But from your perspective, as a manager, as an owner of a business, is also to be looking at improving employee engagement, because you will see the difference in the bottom line. People will care more about your organization and be more loyal. So engagement is an emotional connection to the organization. What's interesting about this graph is also we see the dark blue line, and that is life evaluation. So we see life evaluation increasing. Gallup call this thriving. So we see that 30% of the global workforce feel that they are thriving. So they are enjoying life more than they are engaged in the workplace. We can see over the last couple of years, there has been an increase even from 2018 and 2019. This may be as a result of the COVID pandemic, a result of people changing their lives, a result of people becoming more familiar with what's important in their life and then doing what's important. So people finding now that the remote working is having a positive impact on their relationships right across their life. So these statistics are causing us a little bit of a problem, challenge as leaders. Not only did Gallup find that workplace engagement is decreasing and is at a fairly low percentage, what they also found is that stress on an everyday basis is at an all-time high. So this graph depicts stress, worry, anger, and sadness. Gallup asked the question, did you experience the following feelings during a lot of the day yesterday? So this is signifying people are experiencing stress a lot of the day before when they were asked this question. We also see that worry isn't too far behind stress. There's also reasonably high levels of anger and sadness. Not a surprise, I think, considering what we've been through over the last 2.5 years as a result of the COVID pandemic. The world has changed, not only the pandemic, but also the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is having an impact globally. We know the cost of living crisis is a huge problem for people. So if we think about just even these two slides that I have just shown around both employee engagement in the workplace and the feelings that people are experiencing, just think about what that might feel like in an organisation. So the question I'm asking you today is, what does it feel like to be in your organisation? If you are a leader and a manager in your organisation, what does it feel like for you being in your organisation? Are you familiar with those feelings? Or are you finding yourself blocking out those feelings and trying to avoid them? And so today we're talking about how to drop the rope and get more out of your relationships with your employees. So just for a moment, I'd like you to think about the team that you are leading. Do you feel like you're struggling in your relationships with them? Do you feel like they are pulling against you? Imagine just for a moment that you are holding the rope. And on the other end of that rope, you're finding your team pulling on that rope. They are pulling against you. You're holding one end of the rope and they're pulling on the other. Just imagine that for a moment. Imagine what you are required to do both physically and mentally. Physically, you are pulling on that rope. That is taking energy and that is taking time for you to do that. The longer you pull on that rope, the more energy will be required of you. The more you pull, the more they pull. You're going to get tired. You're going to find that this is having an impact on you physically and mentally. You might hear some thoughts in your head now telling you what to do, second guessing what the team are going to do when they're pulling on the other end of the rope. Let's imagine for a moment that you let go of the rope. You don't resist. What's the difference now? The key difference in dropping the rope is that you now have time to do other things. You're not spending the emotional and physical time struggling and fighting with the team. Instead, now you've got the time and the resources to do those things that matter most to you, to be a successful leader and to have a successful team and organisation. So the key question for you is, well, how do we go about doing this? So to drop the rope as a leader, one of the things that you'll need to do is to develop a super skill called psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is the ability for an individual to take action and behave in a way that brings them satisfaction, even in the presence of uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, and experiences. In other words, when you feel that struggle is showing up, that's the uncomfortable feeling. So when you feel that you're struggling, you're able to take action and behave in a way that brings you satisfaction. rather than a way that you might continue to struggle with afterwards. I say psychological flexibility is a super skill, and that is because research supports that promoting psychological flexibility as the cornerstone of psychological health and well-being. So psychological flexibility is the most commonly importance for your mental health and emotional well-being. It is critical for leaders to develop psychological flexibility. The benefits of developing psychological flexibility are not only improved psychological health and well-being, but also they help you to be more proactive. They help you to regulate your emotions. And psychological flexibility helps you to develop better relationships. So, having heard that now, of course, how do we go about developing psychological flexibility? So, psychological flexibility can be developed using Dr. Kevin Polk's ACT matrix. ACT stands for Acceptance and Commitment Training or Therapy. And Kevin spent many years and many hours trying to take a psychological model and present it in a way that everybody could use to improve their psychological health and well-being. So when we're using the ACT matrix, what we're starting with here is at the top of this line, we've got the 5 senses experiencing. That's the external world that we live in. So we experience the world with our 5 senses. Of course, that's what we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. When we experience with our 5 senses, that flows through us and we then experience in the internal world. So when we see and hear, touch, taste, and smell things, that creates those internal experiences, such as thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations, and even urges. And in addition to that, we also have with this matrix, on the left side of the matrix, relief, and on the right side of the matrix, satisfaction. So psychological flexibility helps us to live a rich, meaningful, fulfilled life. And so what we're doing with this ACT matrix is looking at those things that bring us relief, or those things that we do in the world that bring us satisfaction. So this line is a behavioral line. And in the middle of this matrix, where the 2 lines meet, we have me noticing. So this is you noticing. I'd like you to take the time now and to notice. So when we use the ACT matrix and we're trying to develop psychological flexibility, we work from a point of view, and that point of view is a respectful point of view. And so I'm asking for your permission now to share this point of view, and also for you to join in with me when I'm demonstrating this point of view. So if you're watching this recording or watching this live, please feel free to get a blank piece of paper, draw the matrix. It's simple. And now what we're going to do is we're going to notice each of these 4 quadrants. So on the right side of the matrix, we always start in the bottom right of the matrix, in the internal world, and on the satisfaction behavior line, by asking who's important to you. Well, if you were with me today, I guess I would hear you saying things like, friends, family are important to me, work colleagues, perhaps pets, and also, most importantly, you're important to you. When we've asked the question in the bottom right of the matrix, we move then to the bottom left of the matrix and we ask the question here, what unwanted stuff shows up for you? What do you notice that is the unwanted stuff that's showing up for you? This is in the internal world and it's on the relief side. So think for a moment, what is the unwanted stuff that you notice showing up in your internal world? I said earlier, these are thoughts and feelings. They may be memories, they may be sensations, and they may be urges. So I have some feelings listed here that you might find show up that are unwanted. So often we find things like stress, sadness, tiredness, feeling vulnerable, anger, fear, and anxiousness show up. Worry, one of those other emotions that is showing up regularly for individuals when we look at the Gallup survey. So these are things that are unwanted that we would prefer not to experience. When we experience those things, the question then is in the top left of the matrix by asking the question, what behaviors do you notice yourself doing to get relief from the unwanted stuff that's showing up? So when stress, sadness, tiredness, vulnerability, anger, fear, anxiousness, worry, again, I said, what happens? What do you find yourself doing when those show up? So when stress shows up, you might find yourself eating sugary snacks or drinking alcohol. To the sugary snacks might be you feel to give yourself energy. The alcohol might be to numb the stress. If you're sad, you might frown. So think about what I'm describing here in the top left. These are behaviors, what I would see or hear you doing when the unwanted stuff is showing up. If you're tired, you might find yourself sleeping or taking a nap. If you're feeling vulnerable, you might hide and avoid situations. When you're angry, you might shout. When you're fearful, you might fight, because when the fear response is fight, flight, or freeze. And when you're anxious as well, the other option is you just might do nothing. You might just stay still. So think about for yourself what shows up for you. So again, think about and notice the unwanted stuff that's showing up. Think about how you respond to that. And then think about when you have eaten sugary snacks, drank alcohol, frowned, slept longer, hid, shout, fought, or done nothing. The chances are again that there is going to be unwanted emotions showing up again. So if we think about that rope, that struggle in relationships, personal relationships, or even those with your team. So when you're pulling on the rope and you're pulling on the rope, what chatter is going on in your mind? How are you feeling? When you finish the tug of war, are there thoughts and feelings showing up afterwards? Why did I do that? What was that about? So the feeling of guilt or frustration now can be showing up. What we find ourselves then doing is we find ourselves on the left side of this matrix in a vicious cycle, and we can get stuck on the left side of the matrix in what we call stuck loops. So if we move to the top right of the matrix, the question over here is, what behaviors do you notice help you find satisfaction? So here we're thinking about, if we think about who's important to us, what could we do that would bring us satisfaction in our approach towards those relationships? Well, those might be things like, well, we could notice those emotions showing up and allowing them to be. When we're thinking about ourselves and our own emotional well-being, We might make a phone call or send a text to a friend or family member. That could also apply to a work colleague. We could make nutritious meals for our family and also for ourselves so that we're physically well. We could set work boundaries so that we don't find ourselves struggling with our family and our colleagues. We could arrange to meet a work colleague for a coffee, just to have a chat and just to find out about them. We could take the dog for a walk and we could take time for ourselves. So again, here what we're thinking about is when we do things that are important, they bring us closer towards those important people. And when we think about those important people, we want to be noticing the behaviours that move us towards the satisfaction. Now think about for a moment, if you're looking at your matrix, do you think you're spending more time on the left side of the matrix getting relief? Or are you spending more time on the right side of the matrix getting satisfaction? One thing as a reminder, if this is the first time that you're hearing this, is what is on the left isn't wrong and what's on the right of the matrix isn't right. When we use the ACT matrix, we come from a non-judgmental point of view. So we're simply noticing and not judging. So if you find yourself judging, then think about where you might put that on the matrix. So in order to drop the rope and stop that struggle, first you want to be practicing psychological flexibility, developing your own super skills before we move from the me and into the we. In terms of doing that, you could practice the ACT matrix by simply, if you think you would have the opportunity to notice in the next week or so who or what's important to you, to notice what unwanted stuff is showing up for you. So spending time noticing the thoughts and the feelings, whereas most of us operate very busy lives and don't take time to notice those. So taking time then to notice the behaviours that give us relief from the unwanted stuff and taking time to notice the behaviours that bring you satisfaction. So if you have the opportunity in the next week or so to do that, it'll be interesting if you want to come back and make some comment about the benefits that has brought you. In addition, what you could also do is I offer the Trait Emotional Intelligence model created by Dr. Kevin Petries, and that is owned by Thomas International. So you can complete an emotional intelligence questionnaire that enables you to understand your response to 4 factors and 15 facets. So here you see the 4 facets are well-being, self-control, emotionality, and sociability. Each of those factors have facets. Well-being looks at happiness, optimism, and self-esteem. Self-control looks at emotional regulation, impulse control, and stress management. Emotionality looks at empathy, emotional perception, emotional expression, and relationships. Sociability considers emotional management, assertiveness, and social awareness. And the 2 independent facets are adaptability and self-motivation. So you can see here the trait emotional intelligence allows you to understand your response. Sometimes that can be an advantage before you do the ACT matrix, before you start using that. It helps you to get a benchmark for what your strengths are and what your areas of development are. And it does that by breaking down each of those facets and giving you a score. The trait emotional intelligence looks at 3 areas: an undersupply, an average supply, and an oversupply. So you can see, looking at this diagram, that there are 3 wheels. The inner wheel is the undersupply, the middle wheel is the average supply, and the outer wheel, the oversupply. So you can see here, this individual has a facet in each of the 3 supplies. From this, what we can do is look at what is required for the role and understand what are strengths and what are areas of development. Having an undersupply and an oversupply will leave the individual with both benefits and disadvantages to being in that area. If you want to find out more about the Trait Emotional Intelligence questionnaire, then feel free to use the button below, book your complimentary 30-minute consultation, and we can have a discussion about how this could work for you and look at whether I might be a good fit to work for you. So the Trait Emotional Intelligence questionnaire works exceptionally well to get you to understand yourself before we might move into what I would do with individuals, is to provide them with coaching using the ACT matrix, because the ACT matrix is creating a greater sense of awareness. And that is what is required to develop better relationships. So once we've looked at developing this psychological flexibility, the next stage then to drop that rope and form better relationships is to develop psychological safety. Amy Edmondson, a professor at Harvard University, coined the phrase psychological safety. And she describes psychological safety as a climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. So what does that mean? Well, in a team where there is high levels of psychological safety, team members feel safe to take risks around their team members. They feel confident that no one on the team will embarrass or punish them for admitting a mistake, asking a question, or offering a new idea. Psychological safety does, however, allow challenge within the organisation. It allows members of the team to challenge the leader to challenge employees, but done so on the basis of that we are moving towards something that is more important, but it is done from a respectful point of view. If we just looked at psychological safety certainly being talked about more frequently, some of that may come from Google had their project Aristotle, which looked at what makes a perfect team. Well, when Google conducted this research, they came up with 5 characteristics of a perfect team. Here you see them listed. Psychological safety is at the top because these are rated in order of importance. And really, Google found that psychological safety was the most important and underpinned the other 4. So psychological safety, Google talk about team members feeling safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. Dependability is team members get things done on time and meet Google's high bar for excellence. Structure and clarity, team members have clear roles, plans and goals. Meaning, work is personally important to team members. And 5, impact. Team members think their work matters and creates change. So far we've been talking about you pulling on the rope. I think psychological safety gets us also to think about why team members might be pulling on the rope. Takes us back to the research from Gallup. If people don't feel engaged, if people don't feel they matter, If people are worried about paying the bills, that means they're going to worry less about your customers and how they perform. It could be that they're worrying about both. But actually, when they're worrying about both, what we know from the psychological perspective is when we're worried and we're stressed, the mind will find it difficult to think logically. So that means we're in a no-win situation. So what we need to be doing is to be working with the team to develop psychological safety. First of all, you're going to develop the skill in terms of developing psychological flexibility. So how do we go about developing psychological safety? Well, again, Dr. Paul created this very simple matrix called the Prosocial Matrix. You might call the psychological flexibility matrix the me matrix, and the psychological safety matrix the we matrix. So what we have here is the same matrix, but in the middle what we've got is us noticing rather than me noticing. And so as we did before, we'd start in the bottom right of the matrix by asking the question this time, what's the group's shared purpose? What is important to the group, to us? Well, if you asked your team that question, what do you think they would respond with? So they may say things like trust, accountability, responsibility, productive, collaboration, teamwork, transparency, harmony, thriving, safe, and also to have fun in work. So again, if you are watching this recording or watching this live, turn over that sheet of paper with the ACT matrix on it and now draw the Prosocial Matrix. Think about what's important either to you as a leadership team or to your team. What do you think your team would respond with when you ask this question? And next, we move over into the bottom left of the matrix, again noticing that we are in the internal world, internal experiencing. So because we're asking the question with us, we, what social unwanted stuff do we notice showing up? So when we're together as a team, what is the social unwanted stuff that might show up for the team? Well, when we ask that question, we might get things like mistrust, tense, under pressure, defensive, exhausted, nervous, conflicted, frustrated, nervous, or feeling undervalued. And as we did before with the ACT matrix, we ask the question, well, what behaviours do we notice showing up that the team do to get relief from the unwanted stuff? So here, what we might find is, as a leadership team, for example, you might hoard information. You might not share information with the team. We might complain about team members. We might complain about our leader. We might complain about colleagues. We might do activities which undermine other people's responsibilities. We might just do the bare minimum. One of the things that we're talking about frequently now is this concept of quiet quitting. When people perhaps feel undervalued, or actually they feel that they are simply looking after their emotional health and well-being, they will only do what they are contractually obliged to do. They will do what is it within their job description. They will do the bare minimum. We might also find ourselves, when we're frustrated, is being involved in rumour and gossip, talking about our colleagues in a way that may not be complimentary. We might create silos rather than the opposite of that clearly is people working together. And we simply might avoid conversations that we might feel are difficult. So as before, just notice, feel free to do this with your team. And so what we're doing is we're stepping back and we're simply noticing. We're stepping back by having a matrix on the wall and asking these questions. We're noticing from a non-judgmental perspective what is showing up. Noticing what we do to get relief, and noticing then when we get relief, what we might be doing, how we might be feeling, I should say, if we move into the feeling and the thoughts that might be showing up when we've gossiped about colleagues. Again, we might feel some guilt showing up. When we've complained about people, we might feel a little embarrassed that we've done that when we reflect afterwards. So we've acted in the moment without stepping back and noticing and pausing for a moment. Again, if we move into the top right, the question here is, what behaviours do we notice bring the team satisfaction when we think about our shared purpose and what's important? So in other words, what are the things that we could do in terms of trust, accountability, responsibility, productive, collaboration, teamwork, transparency, harmony, etc.? So as a team, using the Prosocial Matrix, by noticing the emotions that are showing up, allowing people to talk about those emotions that are showing up without the fear of feeling vulnerable, the fear that people are going to treat us differently, the fear of humiliation. So give people maybe the information that they need to be able to do the jobs effectively. Asking them this question, what is it we need to do that would move us closer towards our shared purpose? The more you talk to people, the more you understand them. And the more you understand them, the more that you're able to give people tools and resources to be able to do the jobs effectively. So give the team the opportunity to work together. We don't want to work in silos. We do want to feel as if we're part of the team. So uplifting the team and motivating the team. You could also conduct an employee survey to find out how people feel about working in the organisation. You could conduct daily team meetings to get feedback from the team so that communication is two-way. You could hold one-to-ones that allow you to check in with your team and simply just have a conversation about how things are going. It doesn't have to be work-related. You could organise social events so people feel part of the team. You develop the harmony and the trust. And also what you could do is define the behaviours and the norms that you want to foster. So asking people what's important to them and understanding what that looks like to them. Developing that can be helpful. So again, just thinking about noticing the behaviours that bring us satisfaction in terms of what's important, and also thinking about what's important to us and what we need to do in terms of those behaviours. So having maybe filled out your Prosocial Matrix, thinking about what your team might ask. Asking, do you think you'd have the opportunity in the next week or so to notice as a team what's important to you? To notice what's important, to notice the unwanted stuff that shows up. To notice what you want to do to get relief from that social unwanted stuff. And to notice then the behaviours that bring satisfaction in relation to that shared purpose. And if you do, and again, you want to get in touch, then feel free to get in touch by either visiting my website. I've provided you with my email address and telephone number. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and also Crowdcast, So you'll see at the top of your screen here, there is a follow button. So you'll be able to follow me on Crowdcast, and you will be updated with further webinars. So I'm committed to providing a monthly webinar. Get in touch if there's a topic that you'd like me to cover. I'd love to hear from you. And get in touch using the website also. There are a variety of resources, recordings of other webinars that I've provided are there. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar. I hope it's provided you with some knowledge and help you to develop the super skill of psychological flexibility, which will have a major impact in your life and your relationships by helping you to drop the rope, to stop the struggle. Imagine not pulling on that rope anymore. It's just allowing it to be. Feel free to drop any comments in the chat box here. And if you'd like to have a chat, please feel free to click the button to book your complimentary consultation. We'll take you through to an online diary to book that. Thank you for taking the time out, and take care. Have a great week.